Okay, welcome to the second recording, looking at the CIMA managerial level case study. So in the first session, which hopefully you've all watched by now, we just had a general look at the case study, what the markers are looking at for when they are marking the case study, and the different skills and competencies that you will be tested on. The aim of this next session is to give you a feel for what we typically do in the earlier stages of the case study course, where we are principally analysing the pre-scene information that CIMA publish approximately 7 weeks before the exam. It's very important to get a good feel for the company that's in the case study, issues that they're facing, etc. So it's a case of just working through the pre-scene step by step to identify what we think the issues are, and then later on in the course we then look at some of those issues. We'll revise certain topics from the various syllabuses, and then we'll do question practice. Now, in the third recording that you will be able to go on and watch after this one, we will be looking at an exam question, and so the exam question requires you to have knowledge of certain extracts from the pre-scene, and attached to this recording, those extracts can be downloaded. We won't look at all of them in this recording because it would take too long. It's just a short recording. Analysing the pre-scene in a typical case study course, I can spend up to 5 hours analysing the pre-scene. So we'll have a look at some of it. I'll give you an idea of how to go through the pre-scene and how to start looking at it, and then you can read the rest of it yourselves before attempting the exam question. Okay, so without further ado, so you should already have a copy of these extracts. They are linked, there's a link to download it from the recording. If you haven't yet downloaded a copy, then it may be worth just pausing the recording, going and getting your own copy. You can either print it out or just have a copy on your screen. You will see the pages that we're looking at on my screen as we go. So, as you can see on the screen, this is an extract from the pre-scene information that was made available for the March 2015 exam. Oops. Oh, there we go. I've had my first question. Can I take a copy into the exam? Right. Now, we do recommend that you print out the pre-scene information and make lots of notes on it. The bad news is, unfortunately, you cannot take that into the exam with you. So any notes that you make are principally for your use while you're preparing for the exam, but you can't actually take anything into the exam with you. If you want to remind yourself of something in the pre-scene, however, when you go into the exam, which is all computer-based, there will be a link to the information, so you can look something up. So it's not, you don't have to memorize everything that's in there, but unfortunately you can't take your own notes in, and you can't take a hard copy into the exam with you. Okay, but it is a shame. I know you spend all this time making the notes, and then unfortunately you don't get to take them in, which arguably you could argue that makes it a little bit less realistic. But of course, if you could just write lots of potential answers and then regurgitate them, and that's not what CIMA want you to do. They want you to react to what happens in the exam room. Right, anyway, let's start having a look then. So as I say, this is just a few extracts from the March 2015 pre-scene. We're just going to look at the first couple of pages to start to get a feel for it. So first of all, if you turn to the first main page, it gives you a little bit of background. It always starts with a bit of background to the company and to the industry. Now, what we can see is that our company is Build. So that's the name of it. I think the name gives you a slight hint at what the company does. It is the third largest construction company in its home country of Sealand, and it has a large competitor, Constructmore. In most pre-scenes, you will find that you have information on the company that you are finance manager of. This is a bit of a role play exam. So you will be working for Build. You will be asked to deal with certain issues in the exam. And we often have some information on a particular competitor, because quite often in the case study, you will be asked to deal with, issues of competition. How can you make yourself more attractive to your customers? How can you, appropriately manage increasing competition within the industry? Then gives us a little bit on the activities that Build perform. So it says the activities can be categorized as civil engineering, development, and investment. And it tells us that each one of those activities is undertaken by a separate subsidiary. Okay, so we've got, it isn't only just one activity. You could be given tasks relating to the fact that it's not that diversified, but there's a little bit of diversification in there. More than one activity. Let's have a look. Good question. Group accounts is definitely going to be in there. Well, yeah, it mentions the subsidiaries, and I would imagine. Well, actually, to be honest, more often than not, we've had 5 cases so far. At this stage, and most of the pre-scene have suggested that the company is part of a group. Group accounts has come up once or twice, and I think if you do see that there are subsidiaries and there's a group structure, you should definitely prepare yourself for a group accounting question, but you won't definitely be tested on it. There are 5 different variants of the exam. You'll only be sitting one of those variants, so you know, if you like group accounts and you're lucky, you will get a question on it, but there will be other things that could be examined as well. But certainly, this is what you should be doing when you're reading through the pre-scene. So you've identified the fact there is a group of companies. That highlights that it's worth going and swatching up on group accounts if you're feeling a little bit rusty on it. Okay, yeah, so group accounting will certainly take place, and you might be tested on it. Then, if we move a little bit further down the page, so it gives you a little bit of information on each of those 3 activities: civil engineering, development, and investment. So if we have a read through each one, now, rather than me reading it out to you, let me just give you a moment first of all. Just have a read through those first couple of paragraphs under the civil engineering heading, and then we'll see if there's anything that we can pick up from them. Okay, so hopefully I've given you enough time to read through that there. So the first thing it tells us in this section is that civil engineering is the principal business activity. This is where the majority of the revenue and the profit will be generated, hopefully. Okay, so it's our principal activity. It gives you some examples there of projects that it would undertake, so building offices, roads, other infrastructure. So, you know, there could be a wide variety of projects. And then, I think very importantly, it does say that the company is operating in a highly competitive market. So again, thinking about our syllabuses, we could be tested on anything from the E syllabus, the P syllabus, or the F syllabus. Now, E in particular looks at how to deal with competition. So you could get questions on, you know, carrying out competitor analysis. You could be looking at, you know, how you can achieve competitive advantage. So E2. That is likely to be of some importance in one of the variants, if not more. Okay, it does say build is well established and it does have a good reputation. Okay, so at the moment it should be doing fairly well, but of course the more competitive the market gets, the stronger the company will have to be to survive. So something on competition, competitive environment is highly likely to appear at some point. And then in the second paragraph, it talks about the fact that customers will invite construction companies to bid on a competitive basis. So you are going to be competing with other companies. Some contracts require build to construct projects according to a client specification. Others will ask build to actually carry out the design work. So, you know, you may be required to design, or it may be, and there are going to be different risks involved in that. So either client spec or asked to design. Have a think, yeah, in the lead up to the exam about the different risks that may exist within the different types of contract. You're right, there is a lot to think about. That's why we get the pre-scene 7 weeks before the exam. And, you know, this is the way to prepare yourself for the exam. Think about all of the different issues that you could be faced with, and do build up this really strong understanding of the pre-scene. Right? But there's an awful lot in there. There's only about 20 pages in the pre-scene. And if you think about this, we're only on halfway down page 1 and look at everything that we've identified so far. Okay, let's have a quick look through the next. Oh, just the final sentence there, actually. It mentions, it says you have your own professional surveyors and civil engineers even. Also, good contacts with outside professionals who can be brought in whenever required. So, talks about good contacts, but again, there is, you know, an importance attached to maintaining those good contacts. And again, in the E2 syllabus, there's quite a lot about, you know, building relationships with other parties. It's important of having strong relationships. Okay, now a quick look through the other two activities as well. So civil engineering is the principal one. However, it then tells us under development, it's a pretty short paragraph, so let's just read through this one together. It says they have some speculative ventures of its own. And I think if you see the word speculative, you might want to be thinking risk there. So there is always the risk that you could lose money on anything speculative. It buys land as an investment. Sometimes it builds projects such as office blocks with a view to finding a buyer once the building is completed. Now, I am from a financial reporting background, and to me, I would look at that and think, oh, there might be a little bit of an accounting treatment to deal with there, because if you buy land for speculative purposes as an investment, then you don't treat it as property, plant and equipment, you would treat it as investment property instead. So worth a little bit of sorting up there to make sure that you are comfortable with the accounting treatment for investment properties. Okay, now investment property isn't actually in the F2 syllabus, but it is in the F1 syllabus, and arguably you can be tested on any of your knowledge that you've gathered to date. It will principally, you know, the exam will principally be testing managerial knowledge, but it may be that you have to go back to some of your earlier studies as well, okay, and there is an example of it. So, F1. Then, investment, last paragraph to have a quick look at. So, Build has a separate subsidiary that owns the buildings that Build retains for investment purposes. So, going back to this point in our group accounts, if we are looking at the individual financial statements, the investment property will be contained within one set of financial statements in particular. It says the buildings are usually rented out to third parties. So, can you think of another accounting issue that might arise from that? Yeah, exactly. You've come up with it, leases. So if you're renting the buildings out, you will be a lessor, but you may have to demonstrate a little bit of your lessor accounting knowledge. And that is very much in the F2 syllabus. Okay, so at some point later on in the course, we will be revising some of these topics. Don't worry about it if it's a little bit rusty at the moment. The key today is just to identify what the potential issues are. And then it says whenever Build's development subsidiary cannot find a buyer for one of its completed buildings, it will transfer that building to the investment subsidiary. So we've got a transfer of assets from one company to another. Now you may have to deal with the accounting treatment of that, but I've mentioned E2 and F2 so far. I haven't yet mentioned P2. Can you think about anything from the P2 syllabus that may be particularly relevant there? There is actually a clue in that word. What am I thinking about? Yeah, transfer pricing. So if you are transferring an asset, or if there is a transaction between two different companies, then in the individual financial statements, you may need to think carefully about the appropriate transfer price that you would add. Now, from a group perspective, it doesn't matter because intercompany trading gets cancelled out, but when you're looking at the individual financial statements, you will have to allocate a price to that. Yeah. So, again, worth doing a bit of revision on transfer pricing, which comes from the P2 syllabus. The investment subsidiary generates rental income with a view to selling them at a profit. Okay. Now, this is just, as I say, a little bit of a flavour of, you know, the type of analysis that you can be performing. I've just seen the comment, yeah, 7 weeks, it sounds like a long time, but actually there is plenty of work to perform. And certainly, you know, to a certain extent, if you've just passed your objective test papers, then a lot of this knowledge will be new to you, it'll be sitting there. If you've studied some of these topics quite a while ago, then it may be that you need to go back and do a bit more swatting up to be prepared for all possibilities. You know, I think one of the challenges with the case study, because there are 5 variants, it's not even possible to really, you know, tip what's going to come up in the exam, because across the 5 variants, everything that we've identified there on just, what, 2/3 of a page, everything could be tested at some point over the 5 variants, but you're just going to get a selection of it. So you do need to be prepared for as much as possible. Okay. Right. I will stop there, and I will leave you to read through the rest of this analysis in your own time. So as I say, what we've got in this handout that you can download, it is only an extract. As I say, there'll be about 20 pages for the real exam. But before you move on to the 3rd recording, and before you have a go at an exam question, definitely have a look through the rest of the information. There'll be lots of useful information that you can draw out in your exam answers. And then also attached to this recording, there is the exam question itself. So once you've read through the analysis and made your own notes and thought about what's important, have a look at the exam question. You can have a go at completing it if you want. It would be a 45-minute task. If you'd prefer, just make some notes on how you think you would answer it. And then in the 3rd recording in this program, we will look at, you know, the appropriate way to answer the question, a little bit of a debrief on the key points that hopefully you would be picking up on. Okay? Do you have any final queries before we finish this session? Give you a moment in case you do. No? Okay, so enjoy reading the rest of the analysis. Have a look at the exam question, and then you can move on to the 3rd recording, which will perform a debrief. Okay, and good luck with the rest of your studies. Bye for now.